justice. I'm excited to have you here and looking forward to the work ahead. All of you are leaders in your fields. We have two chairs who have a wealth of experience and who occupy influential positions in state government in both the executive and judicial branch. And we have members of this commission, we have advocates, we have elected officials, law enforcement, judges, community leaders. And I want to thank all of you for what you're doing right now with your work in the middle of a pandemic, which makes things eminently more difficult. But you're doing a wonderful job, and I'm grateful for that. And thank you for kicking off this task force. I think it's important here to think about this task force beyond any recommendations that are made. We've given you a pretty tight timeline of December 1st. We want to make sure that we are ready to go right back into the legislative session of 2021. We also want to get the word far and wide out through local law enforcement across this state about the recommendations that you're going to make. But I want this task force not just to be thinking about the recommendations. I want you to think about the implementation of those recommendations. And often that is an even harder job. But one of the reasons we assembled this task force as we did is we know that we can reach all areas. I know that talking about race and discrimination is difficult and can often be uncomfortable. But all of us saw the horrific death of George Floyd. And many of us have engaged in serious discussions since then about how we remove racism in our law enforcement and our criminal justice institutions. I don't think there's ever been a point in time where I have seen more eyes open about this issue that I have now. Yes, people have taken to the streets, but I've also seen people who are involved in working every day in law enforcement and criminal justice, people that I've never even heard talk about these issues this way before, that eyes have been open, and now is a unique opportunity. How do these institutions restore the overall trust of communities and people of color? I don't think there's any question that there are many individual success stories out there across the state and the country, and many of you have been involved in those success stories. But overall, there are systemic racial issues in our systems that we have to fix. Our Black population in North Carolina is somewhere between 22–23% of the population, but about half of the prison population is Black. There are other glaring racial statistics throughout law enforcement and criminal justice that need your attention. Another task force will be working simultaneously with you. The Andrea Harris Social, Economic, Environmental, and Health Equity Task Force. They are set to tackle access to health care in underserved communities, economic opportunities, environmental justice, educational opportunities. Racial statistics in these areas are jarring as well. And often in these areas, they spill into the law enforcement and criminal justice system. So the work of that task force will be important as well. You'll be examining some tough issues, and you'll have some disagreements amongst yourselves. It involves law enforcement and criminal justice system practices and accountability. And They include training and use of force and community policing and ensuring a diverse workforce, pretrial release, fees and fines, and more. There's a lot of expertise on this task force, but there's also expertise available for you all to consult. We have several organizations that have been working hard in these areas over the years. The State Reentry Council Collaborative, and you all know the work that my office, at both as Attorney General and as Governor, has been doing in that field. The school justice partnerships are out there working. The North Carolina Sentencing and Policy Advisory Commission, both the criminal justice and sheriff's training standards, training and standards. The North Carolina Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparity in our criminal justice system. The North Carolina Justice Academy, the Center for Reduction of Law Enforcement Use of Deadly Force. All of these organizations will be available to you, and I know will want to be able to have input into this process. I know this is going to be hard work, and I'm grateful to each and every one of you for being willing to tackle this. We are at a unique time. There is an opportunity here where I believe people have been the most receptive to change that they have ever been. And it's up to us to come forward with strong changes to make sure we work toward the elimination of racial bias in our law enforcement and criminal justice systems. So both Mr. Chair and Madam Chair, thank you for being willing to take this on. Thanks to each and every member of this task force. I look forward to strong recommendations and in that effort afterward to help them get implemented. Thanks very much for a moment before you start.
Governor Cooper, thank you very much for giving us that charge this morning. But more importantly, I want to thank you for your leadership by creating this effort to make our criminal justice system work better for every single North Carolinian. This is obviously necessary and important work. Welcome everyone to the first convening of the Governor's Task Force for Racial Equity in Criminal Justice. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Josh Stein, the North Carolina Attorney General. I'm going to offer a few words of introduction myself, and then my fellow co-chair, Associate Justice Anita Earls, will welcome you all as well. And then we look forward to hearing from each one of you a little bit about yourselves, your background, your perspectives, your hopes as we begin this important task. And unfortunately, we're not sitting around a table together. And so what I'll do is call on folks by name, alphabetically by last name. And if you could, try to limit your words to 90 seconds or so. We have 25 members on the task force, and we want to hear from everybody. And we also have a full agenda today. So I may end up reminding folks if they start getting over 90 seconds or so. Once we're done with that welcoming and introductory part of the agenda, Justice Earls is going to lead a discussion on key process issues for our work. How are we going to actually achieve the task that Governor Cooper has asked us to do? We'll take a break, recognize that that's necessary. And then out of the break, we're going to have a moderated session on racial inequity, and that'll be the bulk of what we do today. And then finally, we'll wrap up today's session. Governor Cooper just gave us our mission, which is to identify and implement ways to make our criminal justice system work more equitably. When he and I first discussed this effort, he made it clear to me that he was not interested in some blue ribbon commission report for a bookshelf, that he wanted an action-oriented task force to bring about meaningful change in our state. And so in the coming weeks, that's what we're going to strive to do. We're going to wrestle with many ideas and reforms. It's going to be challenging work. There will be difficult conversations in the process of that, I'm certain, but I am confident that we will rise to this challenge. We must rise to this challenge. There is palpable energy in the streets of our state for reform because Black Lives Matter. People justifiably have had enough. This task force must ensure that the energy that's there is harnessed into meaningful and lasting change to strengthen North Carolina and to help us heal. The governor selected each one of you for a reason. He has confidence in your wisdom, experience, perspective, knowledge, and constructive engagement. Justice Earls and I share that confidence. Our work will be transparent. Our sessions will be recorded and archived on the web so that people all across North Carolina can participate. And to the public watching on the internet, we also want your input throughout this process. And there will be ways that you can engage, where we want you to engage. And Justice Earls will be discussing that further shortly. A little bit of personal background about me. My wife, Anna, and I live in Raleigh. We have for the last 25 years. We have 3 kids, two boys in college and a daughter in high school. I grew up in Charlotte first and then K-12 in Chapel Hill. My parents moved our family to North Carolina in 1967. That was right after I was born, so that my father, Adam Stein, could join with Julius Chambers and James Ferguson to form North Carolina's first integrated law firm. And that firm went on to win a number of path-breaking civil rights victories in school desegregation, employment non-discrimination, public accommodations, criminal justice, voting rights. And over the years, that firm has had so many talented and impressive lawyers, including for a time 2 of our task force members, Justice Earls and Henderson Hill. I was raised to believe that the law is a tool to make our country more closely approximate the ideals that we all hold dear: equality, fairness, and justice. That belief motivated me to pursue public office, first in the state Senate and now in the Department of Justice. That belief is why I have been pursuing reforms to our criminal justice system as Attorney General for the past 3.5 years, including pretrial release and accountability initiatives, so that when people are detained before their trial, it's because of the risks they pose and not the size of their bank account. Effective reentry programs for people leaving incarceration to help them succeed. Programs for people with addiction to divert them from the criminal justice system into the healthcare system where they can get treated and well. Raising the age for juveniles and eliminating the backlog of untested sexual assault kits sitting on the shelves of local law enforcement all across our state, among many other issues. That belief is why I am honored to begin this work on the task force with you. It's my great honor to do so. And at this point, Justice Earls, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Attorney General Stein, and thank all of you. My name is Anita Earls. I am an Associate Justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court, and I am truly honored to have this opportunity. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and I know that each of you has made a commitment of your time and energy, and I'm just grateful to you for that. I want to start my comments by quoting Justice Sotomayor, if I may. Reading Supreme Court opinions is something I do a lot of. And what strikes me about her comments that I want to share with you are that she, like Governor Cooper, recognizes that the court system has that the decisions that courts make, that what happens in the court system at every level deeply impacts the issues that this task force is designed to address. But she wrote this in a dissent in a case in 2016 where the defendant, and it's a Fourth Amendment issue, the defendant was white, but the case was about when police can stop people and whether or not later information can justify an illegal stop. And what she said in dissent was, this case tells everyone, white and black, guilty and innocent, that an officer can verify your legal status at any time. It says that your body is subject to invasion while courts excuse the violation of your rights. It implies that you are not a citizen of a democracy, but the subject of a carceral state, just waiting to be cataloged. We must not pretend that the countless people who are routinely targeted by police are isolated. They are the canaries in the coal mine, whose deaths, civil and literal, warn us that no one can breathe in this atmosphere. They are the ones who recognize that unlawful police stops corrode all of our civil liberties and threaten all of our lives. Until their voices matter too, our justice system will continue to be anything but. So I think that this task force is a recognition by the governor of our state and by all of you that those voices do matter. And I know that our task is not an easy one, but I wanted to sort of start out with that recognition that what courts decide makes a difference, and that it truly impacts all of us. So why should I be on this commission? Let me just say a word about my background. For the first 30 years of my career as a civil rights attorney, for those of you who may not know, for the first 10 years, I started out doing a wide range of civil rights cases, including a number of police misconduct cases. So representing the families of individuals killed by police officers or otherwise the victims of excessive use of force. And at the same time, at that period and later, representing police officers, African-American and in another case, Latino police officers who felt they were being discriminated against by their police department. So, and in a sort of a different perspective on the issues, intersection of race and policing. I also had a lot of involvement in these issues when I was at the Justice Department, because one of my duties as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General involved a section of the Civil Rights Division that dealt with police departments. And so under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, investigations into police practices and system-wide reform of a police department was something that the section that I supervised was heavily involved in. And so I think I bring that background and that experience to bear on the issues that we're addressing here. And I also bring the commitment of the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, who has been very clear in her public statements about recent events that the racial disparities that exist in our court system have to be addressed. And I know that she is 100% supportive of what this task force is about. And she brings to bear the Administrative Office of the Courts and a lot of useful resources from the court system. So I wanted to be clear about that background, and I'm eager to hear from all of you and to learn a little bit more about what you bring to this task force. And the other thing we asked you to address is, what are your hopes? So my hopes are that we truly do have a participatory process, that the voices of community are heard, and that we come up with put in place systemic changes that will move us toward racial equity in a long-term sustainable way. So I will stop there and look forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you, Justice Earls, very much. Okay, well, at this point, what I'd like is if everyone can give about 90 seconds, just like what Justice Earls said. And what I'll do is go in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Tara Callahan. Tara. And remember to take yourself off of mute when you start speaking.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be able to be part of this task force. My name is Tara Callahan. I started off my professional career addressing racial bias in capital punishment and recognized that any meaningful change had to happen in a bipartisan way. So I founded Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform 4 years ago. and have been able to be part of Raise the Age and expunction legislation. And I have been really happy to be part of some of this meaningful reform in these really trying times, because I think it's an appropriate response. And I'm so honored to be part of this with all of you.
Thank you, Tara, very much. Sheriff James Clemens. Sheriff James Clemens, sorry.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone. Sheriff Clemens, Richmond County. Started my career in 1980 at the time it was called North Carolina Department of Corrections. In 1989, came to the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, where I've worked and still working to this day. 2010, elected sheriff in Richmond County. 2019, I was elected as the president of the North Carolina Sheriff's Association, representing all 99 sheriffs in North Carolina. Now I'm presently the chairman, soon to be ex-chairman of the executive committee, where my friend and colleague, Sheriff Ingram, will take over that particular slot as he's the president now. I'm also on the Commission for Justice Reinvestment in North Carolina, the Commission for North Carolina Sentencing, and also I am now a commissioner on the President's Commission, Washington, D.C., Department of Justice for law enforcement and the administration of justice through the Department of DOJ, I'm sorry. My hopes are that we find solutions to the problems that we have that's impacting racial equity and criminal justice, also bringing back trust to the badge and the community, and hopes to be able to educate both sides, community and law enforcement, because there is definitely a disconnect, because those in the community really don't know what we do. A lot of times we don't really pay attention to what's happening in our community. So I hope that we could do that, and also to be able to sit down and listen to everyone's concerns, everyone's experiences, and come up with solutions. We've talked for so many years, and it seems like that's all we ever do is talk, talk, talk. And I hope that this time, that this particular panel can come up with solutions to give the people hope in the community, give law enforcement officers who are out there working every day in this profession to do the job that needs to be done, and also bringing the community involved in it and making it a great partnership and what it should have been from day one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheriff Clemens. Mayor Mitch Colvin.
Thank you, Attorney General. Pleasure to be with you and Justice Earls and all the other panelists. My name is Mitch Colvin. I am the mayor of the city of Fayetteville, currently in my second term. And I feel honored to be amongst so many legal minds and law enforcement professionals. But I think the perspective that I would like to add to this is that as an African-American male, I can truly understand and empathize for the population that's disproportionately impacted by the current justice system that systemically has overwhelmingly set this population up for failure in a number of ways. That once young men, African-American or minorities, women are entrapped into this system, that they are dealing now with a life of systemic state-sponsored discrimination with education, housing, and the ability to be able to have a job and to take care of themselves or their families. So I hope that what comes out of this meeting today is some meaningful changes. As a mayor, I share the perspective of trying to deal with a population of people that is almost evenly balanced as far as demographics. But in the last 3 months, we've dealt with the problems of 1918, where the last pandemic was here, 1932, where the economy had nearly collapsed in the Depression, in 1968, where the civil rights movement was at its height. And so trying to calm a set of constituents down and citizens, I want to bring a perspective that hopefully will result in some systemic changes that they can look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Chief C.J. Davis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to serve on this esteemed panel. Attorney General and absolutely Justice Earls, good to see you both again. I look forward to contributing to this conversation. Some of you already know that I sit as the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE. And some of the work that we've been steeped in over the last several weeks is to work with our senators and legislators to promote standards, law enforcement standards nationally on the national stage, as opposed to just working here in the state. We just feel that this is a pivotal time in our history, that there's so many people leaning forward and wanting to see meaningful change from a bipartisan standpoint. So I look forward to the contributions that this panel will make towards those changes here in the state of North Carolina.
Thank you very much, Chief. Representative James Galliard.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Good to see you, and also Associate Justice Earls and all of you. Thank you for allowing me to be a part. This is a sort of a bittersweet appointment. Grateful for the appointment, but wish a task force of this type was not needed. I'm James Galliard. I serve as senior pastor of Word Tabernacle Church. We are a Rocky Mountain-based church with members that come from 10 North Carolina counties and 6 Virginia counties. I also serve in the state legislature, serving House District 25, which is the city of Rocky Mount, and 20 of the 24 precincts in Nash County. The last 20 years of my work has really been centered around human, economic, and community development. I spent a big chunk of that work post-apartheid, and spending a lot of work in South Africa, in Potchefstroom, Soweto, and Johannesburg. I'm probably the only biracial member of the North Carolina General Assembly. And so this work for me is both personal and professional, and really looking forward to the engagement. And I hope that we'll be able to kind of address the real prickly issues that I'm sure will be a little difficult, but needed. So thank you again, Attorney General.
That's great. Thank you, Representative. Sergeant Billy Garton. Maybe on mute if he's on. Try to unmute. Oh, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sergeant Billy Garton. I work at the Raleigh Police Department. I've been a member of the Raleigh Police Department now for 19 plus years. My background obviously is in training. What I hope to bring to the panel is an expertise in the selection and the application of force, and then the documentation of that force. But I also am looking to take back to my department the perspective of many of the folks on the panel. I get to see it a lot from one side, being the law enforcement side. And I'm very excited and happy to be a member of this panel to kind of get a perspective from all different angles. And the overall goal for me is to obviously take this information back and make my department a better department, but also to offer my expertise to the panel as it relates to the use of force.
Very, very helpful, Sergeant. Thank you very much. Commissioner Mike Hawkins.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to serve on this committee. My perspective, or my purpose on this board, I'm an elected official. I'm a local elected official. I'm a county commissioner, chairman of the Board of Commissioners in Transylvania County, which is up in the western part of the state. Brevard is our county seat. And I think from my perspective, there are two things I'd want to mention. The first is that, again, here in Transylvania County, I think I'm lucky in that my sheriff, David Mahoney, and also my chief of police in the main town, which is Brevard, a gentleman named Phil Harris, they are both very proactive in thinking about things like community engagement and some of the things Sheriff Clemens mentioned about just the education part of people don't always understand the law enforcement end, and they work with citizen academies and other types of vehicles to try and, again, be proactive. And so I've seen some of these things that I think we'll probably be talking about in the upcoming months. I've seen some of these things up close, and I've seen that they work, at least in a rural setting. They certainly work, and I'm looking forward to again hearing about what other people are doing and sharing some of the things that I've seen. The second thing, again, locally here in Transylvania County, I've been very lucky to also serve with a commissioner who used to be a member of the General Assembly. His name's David Geis, and he served many years, several years ago. One of the things that he did was he was a driver, he was a main sponsor and a driver of it's called the Justice Reinvestment Act, which was significant and very real reform in sentencing guidelines that took place back in 2011. It was a bipartisan effort, and so and it's something that I hear about from David a lot. It's something that's very close to his heart. And I bring that up just to say that that's a tangible example of the fact that meaningful reform can come out of the legislature, at least could in 2011. And to the point that the governor made earlier, and I think Sheriff Clemens also made, interested in coming up with ideas that don't just look good on paper, but can actually work in the real world. And
That's
I'm
great.
very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, very much. Henderson Hill. You might be on mute still, Henderson.
Sorry about that. Good morning. I'm Henderson Hill from Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. And during a 39-year career as a lawyer, I've been honored to serve as a public defender, a civil rights attorney, a death penalty defense attorney, and a policy advocate for transformative change in criminal justice. This last year, I've been serving as a senior counsel for the ACLU Capital Punishment Project in Durham. The governor's charge to this incredibly diverse and talented task force promises something historic. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to confront the legacy of slavery, the Black codes, and Jim Crow, and how these policies, clearly of white supremacy, have shaped our hugely racially disparate policies of mass incarceration, the modern death penalty, and policing practices that have been adversarial and toxic to the African American community. The task force and the state more generally has been gifted by two extraordinary assets. One is the Racial Justice Act, and the other is a recent history work, David Zucchino's history of the 1898 insurrection in Wilmington. I've just had an opportunity to read that book, has much to offer. I would urge three priorities for this task force. One is reframing the meaning of justice, and I think at the top of that is taking the death penalty out of the quiver of tools that we have. Two would be enactment of a Second Look Act to redress extreme sentences imposed over the last 30 years. The work of the Model Penal Code, the work of the Sentencing Project have much to offer in this regard. And three would be a transformative change in the role and the scope of the policing function, with a special attention to the hostile and belligerent relationship, too often, between police and the African American community. Thank you. I am excited to work under the leadership of Justice Earls and A.G. Stein as we examine and recommend policies to effect transformation of criminal justice administration, and for the first time, establish racial equity as an organizing principle. Glad to be with you.
Thank you very much, Henderson. Secretary Eric Hooks.
Thank you, sir. I'm grateful to take part in this task force. I'm thankful for the leadership of our governor, Attorney General Stein, and Justice Earls for the leadership that you all bring to this endeavor. I sit before you cloaked in my 53 plus years as a Black male. I'm also clothed in a blue suit, which has been usually identified as law enforcement, where I first took my oath back in 1989. I'm undeniably and humbly proud to be both. I've worked in the field through tragedies of murder, drug trafficking, officer-involved shooting, and public corruption during my career with the SBI. I maintain that law enforcement at its best is a noble profession, and law enforcement has to serve all communities. Since I've served as Secretary of the Department of Public Safety over the last 3.5 years, we've been intentional in our efforts to serve all communities in a full spectrum of public safety missions throughout the state, with law enforcement, corrections and rehabilitation, juvenile justice, emergency management, our National Guard, and more. My brother, who's a pastor in service to the Lord, blessed me with this sermon this past Sunday when he touched on the topic to help me walk worthy in the vocation of my calling. That really stirred my spirit as we go through these troubling times and serves as a reminder for all of those who are empowered to protect all of our community. I view this as a great opportunity born out of tragedy. I hope that my life experiences, which includes my journey as a public safety professional, brings discernment for constructive collaboration, values-based leadership by all, and a certain amount of wisdom within this important work. Whereas I will let history judge whether or not that I maintain that wisdom myself or we as a collective body, I have often found that the wisdom is often just found in coming together. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve. There are a lot of resources that the governor named. I am honored to serve as the chair of the State Reentry Collaborative and also have the function of staffing the Governor's Crime Commission, who has done some work on bail reform and has some additional perspectives that will make available to the chairs and subsequently other folks concerning traffic stop data collected by the SBI as well. And I am here to learn as well as to give my input. Thank you, sir.
Mayor Hooks, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sheriff John Ingram.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Governor Cooper, Attorney General Stein, and Justice Earls and fellow members. I'm John Ingram, Sheriff of Brunswick County. I've had the honor of serving as sheriff since 2008. I've served my community as a law enforcement officer for nearly 30 years, all of this being with the Sheriff's Office. As my good friend, Sheriff James Clemens mentioned, I'm currently serving as the president of the North Carolina Sheriff's Association and as a commission member on the North Carolina Sheriff's Training and Standards Commission. My wife, Michelle, and I reside in Bolivia, North Carolina, just south of Wilmington and sandwiched between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So we're on the coast, and right now, I think like most, enduring the rain, but hopefully we'll have some clear skies soon. During my tenure as sheriff, we've implemented a number of proactive strategies aimed at increasing our transparency as an agency and to better connect with the various communities we serve. In 2018, our agency attained accreditation status with CALEA, which helped our agency identify areas of needed improvement, such as our early warning system. And this process allows us to identify potential issues and address them before they become a problem. With this and many other strategies we've implemented, we've been able to forge strong partnerships with our community, something that I'm very proud of. And I look forward to working with this task force to bring about positive change, not only in our little corner of the state, but throughout our state. So thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this.
Sheriff, thank you very much. Chief John Letton. Maybe on mute, Chief. All right, maybe got disconnected. We'll come back to the chief. Senator Mushtaba Mohammed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mushtaba Mohammed, proudly representing Senate District 38 in Mecklenburg County. I just want to begin by saying, look, Governor Cooper said something that no Southern governor, to my knowledge, had said before, and that's Black Lives Matters. I wasn't moved just because Governor acknowledged my friends, my neighbors, and my community, but because he was actually serious about these efforts by forming this wonderful task force to implement genuine change and reforms. That's why I'm so honored to be here today to serve with each of you. Thank you to Justice Earls. Thank you to Attorney General Stein for leading this charge. Thank you to my fellow colleagues in the North Carolina General Assembly, Representative Morey and Representative Galliard, for joining me in these efforts. And thank you to each of you for taking up this charge. I've spent my legal career as a public interest attorney representing children and families at the Council for Children's Rights, and even now continue to serve in public interest law as an assistant public defender. I ran for and now continue to serve in the North Carolina Senate representing Mecklenburg County because for far too long as a public interest attorney, I have witnessed too many of our children being pushed out of our classrooms into jail cells. I've seen so many women who can't even afford to feed their children, much less pay their court fees and fines. So many young men that continue to look for second chances, and yet they found more and more oppression instead. And that's why I'm excited to join each of you in this effort to work toward systematic change. Black Lives Matter every day, not just on Martin Luther King, not just on Black History Month. They matter when our systems and structures and institutions continue to work against the hopes and dreams and progress of our Black brothers and sisters. And we need to reform that change by changing our personnel laws and reforming our use of force laws. We need to look at supporting efforts like Raise the Age and Second Chances, like this North Carolina General Assembly has done before. We need to stop criminalizing poverty and with countless fines and fees. And I believe that we need to do everything we can to genuinely build people in this country and the state instead of building prisons. So I look forward to working with each of you, and I'm excited about this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mary Pollard.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So I'm Mary Pollard. I'm the Executive Director of North Carolina Prisoner Legal Services, but I'll be shortly leaving that position to go be the Executive Director of the State Office of Indigent Defense Services. I'm really honored to be asked to serve on this committee. The issues we're going to talk about are really important to me. For the past 10 years at North Carolina Prisoner Legal Services, I've had an opportunity to review hundreds of convictions and sentences, and I have seen troubling racial disparities in charging decisions and in lengths of sentences. Recently, we've developed data and seen troubling racial disparities in how prisoners are disciplined in our Department of Corrections, which of course affects the length of their sentences. I served for a couple of years at the inception of the North Carolina Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities, and was pleased to learn from a lot of the folks around the table there, members of law enforcement, district attorneys, other public defender types. I worked with the School of Government when it was developing a manual to train public defenders to try to identify and litigate racial issues pre-trial. So that's some of my background. My hope for this committee is that we'll be able to present some really concrete proposals that could be implemented at the agency level, legislation that could be introduced in the next session, but most of all, that there is some sort of permanent structure for somebody, whether it be the people around this table or somebody else, to continue to study and address and identify these issues. They're not going to go away in 6 months. They're simply not. On a personal note, my late father was in law enforcement for over 30 years, and he was a big supporter of the work I do at Prisoner Legal Services, and before that at the Center for Death Penalty Litigation. And I think he'd be really pleased to see everybody gathered around this virtual table today. So thank you. I look forward to getting to know you all and working with you.
Wonderful, Mary. Thank you very much. Kerwin Pittman.
Good morning, Attorney General Josh Stein, Justice Earl. My name and panelists, my name is Kerwin Pittman. I'm a social justice activist based in the city of Raleigh. I'm also the founder and executive director of REPS, Recidivism Reduction Educational Program Services, an organization geared towards helping individuals transition back into society upon release, as well as I do incarceration diversion programs. I'm also the field organizer for Emancipate NC, another organization that tackles structural racism in the criminal justice system, as well as I'm one of the co-founders of Raleigh Demands Justice, a coalition of social organizations that has formed together to combat racially charged issues in the state of North Carolina, as well as I sit on the State Reentry Council Collaborative, headed up by our Governor, Roy Cooper. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to bringing long-term change with our recommendations, and they'll be implemented across the state of North Carolina, and hopefully we can tackle this issue of racist biasness in the criminal justice system together. So thank y'all for having me.
Kerwin, thank you. Very much look forward to your participation. Commissioner Ronnie Smith.
Good morning. I am very honored to be part of this group. I'm Ronnie Smith, Martin County Commissioner. I'm also the president-elect for North Carolina Association of County Commissioners of all 100 counties. And as of next month, I will move into the president's seat. I've served as a commissioner for the last 18 years. I'm a retired United States Air Force officer, and I have seen and I experienced all forms of racial issues. And I'm looking forward to working with this great distinguished group in tackling the issues that faces us today, not only in this state, but across this nation. And I truly believe that we have challenges, but most of all, opportunities and timing is very important. And I think this is the time that we address these issues. And thank you very much for having me part of this group. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. I evidently need to go back to school and learn my alphabet because I missed Representative Marcia Morey. Representative Morey, apologies.
I'm used to it. I'm in the General Assembly, so no problem. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all. I'm Marcia Morey, and I would say my education began when I was an assistant DA in juvenile court. And I became part of the problem because at that time we thought to get kids help, we had to put them in the system. We had to label them a delinquent, a legal label that stayed with them their whole lives. We can't do that anymore. I worked with Governor Hunt when we reformed the juvenile code, and we were innovative, we were collaborative. We all worked together on creative issues, and I think the sky's the limit here. After that, 18 years as a district court judge, and I would go in every day to a criminal courtroom, and 90% of the standing room only courtroom was Black, grossly disproportionate to Durham's population. We have to change that. We can do it with innovation. I went to the General Assembly because I wanted to fight for raise the age, which finally happened. But we can also be creative in our communities with misdemeanor diversion programs, keeping arrest records off anyone's record. So I really look forward to this for recommendations for legislative changes, for policing changes. And let's not forget, starting at the beginning, the youngest kids, to keep them out of the system and address the juvenile population. So thank you very much. Really look forward to this. It's an honor to be here with Justice Earls, Attorney General Stein, and the governor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Morey. Tally Wells.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. I bring the voice and experiences of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities as the executive director of the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. Also significant experience doing reentry work with people with mental illness, as well as intellectual and developmental disabilities from jails and prisons. There's an intersection that we are aware of with race and people with disabilities. And it's important to that we grapple with those issues together. I'm proud that the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities has a new initiative on reentry for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But we also really need to talk about the entry of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and how we reduce that as we have this critical conversation around race and criminal justice. So I'm grateful to be here. I can't wait to learn from each of you and work together on these issues. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Tally. Angelica Wind.
Good morning. My name is Angelica Wynn, and I am the executive director, which is an anti-sexual violence and anti-human trafficking organization based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And what I bring to the group is over 15 years of victory in my role at Our Voice, but also at the North Carolina Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and my role at PISTA Legal Services. I serve as a commissioner on the North Carolina Human Trafficking Commission, and as well as the vice. But I also bring as a result of 1986 amnesty, I work to the racial disparities that occur at several institutes, including education, housing, institutes that, because of the disparity, has the snowball effect where some individuals do not have an ability to live, much less develop a life where they can thrive. And so in the work that I bring in my experience, I can also bring this perspective of looking around of like who defines what this looks like, with access to it, who gets impacted more than on that, but also the question around how trauma, intergenerational trauma, they also plays a role as that are currently incarcerated. And my hope is that we are able to touch on that piece, because trauma, it does play a role in this, in how people get, but whether real solutions that can help support them where they can thrive. I'm grateful to be here, and before I close is that we do come to the table with open hearts and minds, and that we will create a current clearly not. And I again trying to think out of the box. No solution is too out of the question to entertain. Again, thank you so much for having me here, and I'm looking forward and honored to be working with you all.
Thank you very much, Angelica. District Attorney Jim Woodall. Jim, are you on mute? Jim, you're on mute.
There it is. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, sir.
I'm honored to be here. I look forward to the leadership of Justice Earls and Attorney General Stein, and I apologize up front if I call Attorney General Josh Stein Adam. On occasion, his dad has been very active here locally, so I sometimes slip up and call him Adam. I'm the district attorney in Chatham and Orange counties. I've practiced law in North Carolina for 35 years, initially in private practice and in the business world, but as the past 30 years as a prosecutor, 14 years as an assistant DA, 16 years as the elected DA. I'm past president of the North Carolina Conference of District Attorneys. I've served on several legislative task force over the years, including the Youth Accountability Task Force, which focused on Raise the Age, and the Justice Reinvestment Working Group. I'm currently a board member and the incoming vice chair of NCCRED, the North Carolina Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities in the Criminal Justice System. I've been on that commission for about 5 years. I'm the co-chair of the District 18, which is Chatham and Orange counties, Racial Justice Task Force. I think we were the first racial justice task force in North Carolina, and until recently, the only racial justice task force in the state. I think we're facing a unique moment for law enforcement and the criminal justice system as a whole. I hope we can achieve rapid system-wide reform. An observation, I think we have to be humble and be prepared to be humbled by the recognition of the shortcomings in our system and the roles many of us have played in that over the years, including myself. Black lives do matter, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to help prove that over the next few months.
Thank you, District Attorney Woodall. We have 3 members. I don't think Judge Brooke Locklear Clark has yet joined us, and Judge Alan Thornburg and Chief John Letney. We gave all of you all 3 or 4 days heads up. So the fact that so many of you were able to make it is really a testament to how important our job is. I have known almost all of y'all, most of you in individual capacities, and just hearing each of your perspectives and passion for this work, frankly, has lifted me up and inspired me. I am all the more encouraged and humble, as Jim just said, about the work before us. Anita, hand it off to you at this point.
Well, did you, Josh, it might be useful to ask if there's anyone else on the task force that you didn't get to introduce themselves. And we also want to make sure everyone meets our amazing staff folks.
You have a good point. Did I mess up my alphabet earlier? Did I miss anyone else on the task force? And then first, let me ask that question. Everybody get introduced?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then we have 3 co-leads, one from the Department of Justice, one from the Administrative Office of the Courts, and one from the Governor's Office. And Jasmine, why don't you each take it in turn? Jasmine, John Paul, and Natalia.
Thank you, Attorney General Stein. My name is Jasmine McGee. I'm the Director of Public Protection in the North Carolina Attorney General's Office. I work on public safety policy issues to include criminal justice policy, but also sexual assault, human trafficking, and domestic violence. And so kind of an umbrella of public safety issues. And I think the intersection of all of that is really important. And I really look forward to working with all of you and helping provide you with what you need to make the recommendations for meaningful change that you all have spoken about here today.
Thank you. John Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-Paul Jacques. Like Jasmine, I'm very much looking forward to providing whatever support we can to you all as you're doing this very important work. I'm originally from Lafayette, Louisiana. Left there to do schooling in the Northeast, and now I'm back here in the South and very excited to be here in Raleigh, working with Justice Earls as one of her law clerks.
Great. Natalia?
Good morning. My name is Natalia Botea. I am a policy advisor in Governor Cooper's office focusing on public safety and criminal justice issues. I'm new to the governor's office, so I come to this role after 6 years as a public interest attorney at Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy. So looking forward to being a resource to you all. And if you need to reach the governor's office on these issues now or in the future, please be in touch with me. Thanks.
Thank you. Ellen Spoler.
Hi there. I am Ellen Spoler. I work on Jasmine's team at the Department of Justice. I am serving as your project manager on this task force, and I am very honored and excited to do so. So if you guys have any needs, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much.
So members of the task force, you will be hearing from these 4 people with a lot of frequency. So now you know who they are. Okay, thank you so much for that, Anita.
Sure, thank you. Well, the good news is we're right on time, and if I get through this next section a little earlier, we might even have a little bit more than a 5-minute break. But I really do. I want you to know how much we respect all of your time, and we've really tried to plan to make maximum use of it. In this next few minutes, what I want to do is share with you both what the executive order, which Josh has referred to it as our Constitution. It is really, it sets out everything that the task force must accomplish, and it's some of the process issues are already laid out in the executive order. So I'm going to go over some of those, and then I'm also going to highlight for you and hopefully get your input and your reactions to some of the big picture process questions that we have proposals for, but that we want your input on. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen and walk you through these process issues. So you should be seeing a PowerPoint, and so the first part outlines for you what is already in the executive order. So our final report of recommendations is due by December 1st. We are required as a full task force to meet twice a month, although I believe the executive order does say that work groups could count for one of those meetings, but there is at a minimum a twice a month stipulation in the executive order. It does explicitly permit for virtual meetings. Obviously, we hope that there will come a point in time where we can be in person. In terms of how decisions are supposed to be made, the executive order says that we have a quorum if we have a simple majority of task force members, and the decisions on what to recommend, what not to recommend, can be by majority vote of who's present at a meeting. So I think that naturally means that because the meetings are being recorded and you can watch them on YouTube if you miss one, I think while people can send designees, I think the executive order properly interpreted means the actual members have to be with us to constitute a quorum, and the vote would be the actual present members. Obviously, I think we have a goal of decisions by consensus and building consensus and building mutual understanding. But this is what's, at least so you have the ground rules, what's in the executive order. There is some flexibility there. There's the potential to add additional issues. In a minute, I'll go through fairly quickly what the executive order requires us to address, but it also makes clear that that list is not exclusive, and there are if there are other issues that come to us either through our, what we bring to this, what the public brings to us, there's the potential to add that. And also, I think importantly, the executive order makes clear that there's the potential for interim recommendations. So we don't need to wait till December 1st. And you'll see that we have built into the agenda for our next full task force meeting, the potential to discuss, are there some immediate things that should happen? And just to give you a sense of what that might mean, the executive order itself, if you hadn't noted, it does have immediate recommendations for the law enforcement agencies that are under the purview of the Department of Public Safety. It requires them to conduct a review of their use of force policies. It requires that each division have a clear policy articulating a duty to intervene and a duty to report in any situation where an officer may be witness to what they know is an excessive use of force or other abuse of a suspect or arrestee. So those are examples of things that are already in the executive order for police forces that are under the Department of Public Safety. And there may be some recommendations that we as a task force want to make right away, that there's no need to wait till December, things that can be done now. So please be thinking about that. Oh, it's not letting me. Sorry. So what are the issue areas? It's broadly divided into two, one dealing with law enforcement practices and accountability. And there it's everything from training, use of force, recruitment, how do departments retain a racially equitable workforce, to law enforcement accountability and culture, and the potential for pre-arrest diversion and other alternatives to arrest. The other big category is sort of everything else that happens in the criminal justice system. So pretrial release and bail practices, charging decisions, and then criminal trials, which is huge, very broad. Everything that happens from pleas to jury selection to post trial motions, that is a very broad category. And then the use and impact of fines and fees is specifically mentioned. And it's important to note those, because when we talk about how we should divide up the work, we want to figure out a logical way to group these, because we don't want 12 different work groups with only 25 people. So the proposal is that we divide the task force into several working groups, that each group have a collection of those related issue areas. And the idea would be that each working group would meet independently, review the relevant data and research, develop recommendations for implementation of policies, and that they would each group would have a staff member assigned to help facilitate both the substantive work and any administrative tasks. So we wanted to be interactive in terms of figuring out what working groups, how many we should have and what they should cover. And so late after this meeting, we are going to send everyone on the task force a survey by email for you to respond to by next Tuesday. And that survey will allow you to tell us how many working groups you think we should have, which of course is related to which issue areas should be grouped together. I think the thinking of the planning group has been something in the range of 2 to 5, but you take a look at these and think for yourselves how they should be, what you think they should be divided up. The survey allows you to identify additional issues that are not in the executive order, but that you already see and believe are important to examine, and you might want to tell us which working group those should go in. And then in a minute, I'm going to show you what we've come up with as a proposed initial schedule. And so this, we would like to get your feedback on that schedule as soon as possible. So then the plan is that once we receive your survey responses next Tuesday, 2 days later, we can then send back to you a survey that groups what the most representative or most popular configurations were, and allow you to rank those. So we'll get input from 25 different folks about how this should be divided up and try to narrow that into 3 concrete options. Then let us know which working group, and this will be a little hard because we may not have picked which of the 3 working groups we want to have, but where do you want to be assigned? And that can be as general as, here are the 3 issues I want to work on. But give us some indication from your perspective of which working group you'd want to work on. And then we're also encouraging people to let us know if, based on your own time commitments and interest, whether you'd be willing to be the chairperson of a working group, because we will need to identify lead persons for the working group to make sure that everything is carried out. So we're proposing to send that second survey on the 16th, and we'd like the responses back by the following Tuesday, which will then set us up for our next task force meeting. So that's all about how we're internally organized and divided up. The next key process issue that we wanted to lift up for input and reaction, and I think it probably makes sense for me to stop at the end of all this because of the way I'm doing the screen share, if there's any immediate reactions to any of this. But on the public comment question, we want to make sure that there is a robust and ample opportunity for public engagement. So of course, these are public meetings. The work group meetings will also be public meetings, but we also want to, though these are clearly situations where people can listen, but they're not, they don't have the floor to talk. We already have a website where there is a link that a form people can fill out. We've already begun to get comments from the public in that website. So that's up and ongoing. But in terms of formal opportunities for public comment, we are thinking of having 2 or 3 public comment only meetings. So meetings of the entire task force, open to the general public of North Carolina, and the public would be given 2 minutes each to make a statement. In addition to that, so that we can be a little more targeted geographically, and also hear a little bit greater length than just 2 minutes, we're thinking of having some listening sessions organized by geographic region of the state, and that we may in fact invite certain stakeholders to come and make presentations, give us their views in a slightly not so much a public hearing type format, but a more interactive listening session format. There are a lot of different ways we could get public comment, and this is sort of what we've come up with as a proposal, but we want to get your best thinking on how to effectively do this. And I think we wanted to make sure that not everyone best communicates in writing. So, we want to supplement whatever web comment submission process, give people a chance to come and speak to us directly. Then another process issue is how does this commission gather the data that it's definitely wants to have in front of it, and so we are proposing that there be a data consultation team that would be external experts that can both tell us where data we have, where is there data about what's going on in North Carolina. If it doesn't exist, is there a way to collect it, and how would that happen? Where would that happen? To help us assess the reliability of sources. Is the data we're getting the kinds of data that experts in the field consistently rely on? And legitimacy in the sense of, is what we're looking at actually answering the question that we have as a task force? So the data consultation team can, I think, the proposal here is that they really assist us in making sure that our recommendations are data driven and supported by data. And I think that we really do have a lot of rich sources in North Carolina that will help us, in part because we can get to disaggregated data. We can learn what's happening in one part of the state and how that differs from another part of the state, and what that might mean about what recommendations could work where. So that's the proposal on data gathering. The next slide, this just shows you, this is just a direct lift from the executive order. And Governor Cooper talked about some of these efforts that are already underway, have been underway, programs who have been working on these issues. And so the executive order requires us to consult with them. So that raises the question of how we should do that. And our proposal is pretty simple. There are other ways we might do it, open to suggestions. But even as we were going around doing the introductions, I was like, okay, that person can be our liaison to that group. Some of you already have involvement with these groups, but our proposal is that one person from the task force would be recognized, designated as the main point of contact, and that your responsibility as the main point of contact would be to make sure that the right working group is meeting and hearing from the groups that are named in the executive order. There may be additional places we should consult, and the working groups or the data experts might identify additional groups we want to consult with. But this was at least our initial suggestion for how to make sure that that part of the executive order is carried out. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we can make we don't have to wait to December 1st to make recommendations. And so our suggestion is that we be ready to discuss that at the next full task force meeting. So let me share with you the document that we have, which is an initial meeting schedule. This is really just to get something on the table for people to respond to. We know this will, even from the outset, need to be adjusted, needs some changes, and as we go through the process, we may need to make adjustments and changes, but this was at least a starting point to get your feedback on. So the concept behind the schedule is that the working groups would meet twice to prepare their initial recommendations with 2 weeks in between those meetings, that we would have 3 of those public comment, public hearing sessions I mentioned, that we would have an initial one early on. People have heard about the task force now. They are already, I've done some, and Josh has too, we've done some public events where people have some ideas about what they want us to look at. So we should, as a task force, hear those. Then we would have a public comment session after the work groups have made some initial recommendations, to get feedback on those recommendations, and then a third final set after the revised work group recommendations. In this schedule, the working group meetings are identified by week, but the working group could, which day of the week could be determined in part by the schedules of people in the working groups. There is a goal that they not overlap so that we don't have 2 working groups meeting at exactly the same time. But other than that, there's some flexibility. So I'm not expecting you to like commit this to memory as I'm scrolling through. We're going to email this to you, but I just wanted to throw out there what our initial thinking is on the schedule. And as you'll see, this has us with the working groups finalizing their recommendations the first week in November. There's actually a pretty good gap between October and November, on the assumption that that period is the sort of last 2 weeks of October, first week of November, is going to be pretty demanding for many people because of the election. But the schedule does have us not meeting on the Friday after Thanksgiving, but having a final report by Tuesday, December 1st. So that is all that I have to share. And we have just a couple of minutes before our break. Does anyone have any immediate feedback they want to give us to any of those general process recommendations? You can just unmute yourself if you want to comment.
Justice
yes.
Earls, this is Mitch Colvin. Will you email those slides? I didn't, on your schedule, mine was showing blank. I couldn't see that proposed schedule, the last slide you showed.
Yes,
will you send those
definitely.
Okay, thank you.
We will email that out today along with the first survey. Yeah, sorry about that.
Justice Earl, are the members of the data collection team already identified and known, or is it to be assembled?
So I may need to phone a friend on this one, but I think that our team has identified potential folks for that, but have not settled on who that might be.
That's right, Justice Earls.
Yeah. So that means we can share with you who our ideas are, and you can certainly add to that if you have some good folks in mind.
I do think one of the rich assets of North Carolina are the number of experts at the universities that would be available and have much to contribute. So I'm sure there's overlap between the folks that you've identified and those I would suggest.
But we definitely welcome input and ideas.
Yeah, and I would mention that our racial justice task force here, we've had Frank Baumgardner at UNC doing a very robust data analysis for us, and we're getting his initial report week after next. And I actually think a lot of the data we are looking at would be interesting here. And it's not just for our district. We're using our district as kind of the model of how we're going to deal with the data, but he's gathering the data for the entire state.
Yeah.
And it's something that he's been doing for about 1.5 years now.
This is data on what, on traffic stops or?
It's actually data on how cases proceed through the system, charging decisions, outcomes in court. I don't think anywhere else in the country is doing what Frank's trying to do. It looks at how things line up with people's socioeconomic status using property values of where crimes are charged. So I'll definitely talk to Frank about that. Our Racial Justice Task Force and our local bar, we're the ones who have financed this study, but I think everyone would be very willing for this group to use it if it is useful, and I think it probably would be.
Thank you for letting us know that's coming out. Thank you.
And Frank Baumgartner would have been top of my list of folks to suggest to the team.
Okay. Any other reactions? Okay, so we are.
Hey, Anita, before we go to break, I want to apologize to Deborah Maxwell. I told you all I had alphabetical problems. Clearly M's because it was Marcia and Deborah. Deborah, if you would, please take a moment and talk about yourself. Sorry very much for the
No problem.
skipping over.
This is what we're trying to address, the missing person, that missing Black person. Thank you, Governor, Justice, and Attorney General. I am Deborah Dix Maxwell, born and still living in the city of 1898 called Wilmington, North Carolina, where I'm the president of the local NAACP, a board member of North Carolina Child that has worked on Raise the Age consistently. And we also just have hired our own first local African-American police chief. So I am glad to come here because we also have an in-cash bail project, which I hope that will somewhere be within that document when we're talking about, because that is something that really discriminates against people of color. And also part of our Second Chance project that is here by our local reentry program. So I'm thankful, grateful, and will give you the humanistic perspective as a retired social worker on this group also. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. So I did have a slide about what's going to happen next. But the bottom line is we, in order to use the breakout function that we want to use during our guided discussion about racial equity concepts, we need to be able to use Zoom in a different way. So you task force members are receiving an email from Ellen with a link to the new meeting. So you will exit this meeting, Zoom meeting concludes. It will still be public. We can't live stream it, but it will be, this portion of the meeting, including the breakout sessions, will all be recorded, and we will post it to the Attorney General's YouTube channel in the coming days. So at this point, I'm going to give us until 11:30. So if you would take a break, make sure you stand up, walk around, and log back in using the link that you'll get from Ellen at 11:30.